Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's conservative podcast with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. We ask that you like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. You can also download it, listen to it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. A message that is not always said in the mainstream media and something ears need to hear. Eyes need to hear this show, and we need your help to do that. Another great program lined up for you and another great guest. He's coming back on the show, a friend of the show, Dr. Stephen Ellis from Cumberland, Colchester, Member of Parliament for that riding and also the critic for health, the Shadow Minister for Health. A good man. Thanks for coming back on. For myself and I think many other MPs, they're getting calls, emails, you name it, regarding some tinkering that Health Canada is thinking about doing with their regulatory requirements concerning natural health products. And this is something that the Liberals seem to do every time they're in power. I remember this back in like 2004, they were tinkering with it or thinking about tinkering with it. And luckily the Conservatives won power in 2006 and all that kind of stopped. And then, of course, they're back in power now, and here we go again. So tell us about what is going on, just so we can all explain it before I go into kind of more questions on the specifics.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's a harbinger that there's an election coming up, and we can get control again and move forward with the non-tinkering. But that being said, generally speaking, there are significant regulations around natural health products in Canada. They've been proven to be very, very safe and well regulated. However, as you mentioned, the Liberals once again want to begin to make changes, and most importantly, as I've met with the Natural Health Products Association, is with regards to labeling and with regards to a cost recovery program, as they named it, as the Liberal government has named it. So those are the two main things that have caused significant consternation and concern for the association. And many of this association represents mainly small and medium-sized businesses, which we all know is the backbone of Canadian business.
So why does this keep coming up over and over again when Liberals are in power? I think that's the one thing that I think I know the answer. I can probably come up with a few. But is it more about kind of the bureaucracy in general, trying to come up with another brilliant idea and then not realizing that small businesses across Canada could be put out of business altogether because of some of their changes that they're proposing?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a few different things. They want control. The Liberal government loves to control your life and tell you exactly what you can and cannot do. So I think that's one of the important things. I think we also need to understand that they fail to recognize the importance that natural health products are to Canadians. I would have to say that my office has received more inquiries of concern with these changes than, I want to say, any other legislations that has been proposed in the last 18, 19 months since I've been in Ottawa, even more than Bill C-21, which of course was related to gun control. It would be a toss-up, but it's an amazing number of people who use natural health products, and it's their choice. This is what they choose to do, to use something that they feel improves their health and their outlook and well-being. And in Canada, of course, knowing that this is already a safe space, because there's been many, many years of use of natural health products, that we know that to add regulation is just an unfair regulatory burden to consumers and to manufacturers and distributors who are these small and medium-sized businesses in Canada.
And not only that, there are some common sense solutions to this problem, or so-called problem that you would say. One would be, as you talked about off air, was using a QR code that could put the requirements that Health Canada is asking for in many different languages, and as it changes, you can update the wording, right, rather than having to deal with labeling issues. Like there are so many easy solutions to this problem that Health Canada has created, because as you said off the top, it is well regulated and it is safe.
I really like what you said, because this is a space where you could use some innovation and heaven forbid you could use common sense here to make these changes, to say, instead of making these tiny print on plastic labels that are peel off on a bottle of say vitamin D, that you could actually be innovative and move forward and say, because we know that many people from different backgrounds who speak primarily a language other than French or English would then be able to use a QR code to have it in their native language. That would be more helpful. It would actually improve understanding, which would also improve safety. That would allow us to be very respectful to people who have chosen to make Canada their new home. And we could also do it for Indigenous populations as well, because it appears there perhaps is percentage-wise or per capita-wise more Indigenous and more immigrant people who would use natural health products than perhaps someone like myself who was born here in Canada. Be that as it may, it's important that we're respectful of people who have chosen to make Canada their home and people who live here now. So if there's innovative ways we can make changes that also doesn't involve adding a bunch of plastics, and I think we would all agree that that would not be a great idea, that we could make those changes very simply.
Personally, I think those labels where you have to peel off are just a pain, because sometimes you rip the whole thing and then you've got a piece of whatever laying around or in the garbage. It drives me absolutely crazy. So having something like this, and this is something we talked about a few shows ago, common sense with this government is out the window. Nothing seems to make sense with this government. But of course, to get away with, moving away for the elitist opinion, you have to go with what is opposite from the common person, right? So you have to, and then somehow do the mental gymnastics to make what you're saying new and otherwise sound reasonable, which never really does.
Well, it's an impossibility when it's just not reasonable. You can't, when you begin to think about it, you say, I can't wrap my mind around that. What is the sensibility? Because there isn't any. There's no common sense attached to it. And I think the other thing that we know very clearly with these regulations, the other non-common sense thing, of course, is that as they have named it, the Liberal government has named it their cost recovery program, and we all know that these remedies, these natural health products, are already subject to GST and HST, so there is an element of cost recovery there. But they again want to go beyond that, and my only thought is related to the fact that because they spend money like there is no tomorrow, they have to start recovering money somehow. And this is, of course, it's another tax on businesses. It's not just a tax, but it is an attack on businesses, small and medium-sized businesses who manufacture and distribute natural health products in Canada. And we know that these exorbitant fees that the Liberal government is asking them to pay is going to drive them out of business. And for me, that's a huge concern. We know that Canada is built upon small and medium-sized businesses, and this will drive them out of business.
Death by 1,000 cuts, which is how some people describe what the Liberal government is doing to small business right across Canada. It really doesn't matter what field you're in. It's one regulatory burden, one hurdle, one more red tape hurdle that you have to go through and figure out where your small business, you should be focusing on keeping your business going or innovating or coming up with the next great thing. Now, big corporations, they have lots of resources at their disposal, and they can do that often quite easily while putting barriers in front of small business while lobbying government to do that, right? It's quite the cozy relationship the big industries have with government, and they love it.
Well, you know what? The concern I have on top of that is with these costs associated with labeling changes and their quote unquote cost recovery program. Once we drive Canadian businesses out of business, not we, once the Liberal government drive them out of business, the difficulty is then Canadian consumers who still have a desire for natural health products will have to obtain them internationally. And I don't know if I mentioned it to you or not, Jamie, but I had a conversation with the health minister, Minister Jean-Yves Duclos, about these two things. And I asked him very specifically would these new burdensome regulations be applied to internationally made product? And he couldn't answer me that question. And therefore, all we're doing then as a country is putting our own businesses at a significant disadvantage. And of course, if there's no financial burden for international companies, then they are not going to go out of business or feel the sting at all. And then Canadians will be driven to use internationally made products, which when we have our own here in Canada, those are the ones we should be supporting.
Another issue I have with this whole thing is, to my understanding, this won't be brought forward in legislation, correct? This will be more of Health Canada bringing in a regulation that has the force of law without parliamentary approval, giving these unelected bureaucrats and the minister too some extraordinary power to start to bring in sweeping rules that could put businesses out of business. And parliamentarians don't have the opportunity to debate this in Parliament.
You know what? As you well know, and viewers need to understand this as well, listeners need to understand this. This is a trick of the Liberal government. We saw it with the Order in Council around handguns and banning guns in general. And we saw it with an automatic escalator tax on alcohol. Things that we don't get to vote on in Parliament that they have just enshrined into their regulatory and burdensome processes that normally would have the checks and balances of everybody looking at it and saying, hey, does this continue to make sense? Why are they doing it? Please explain yourself. Tell us the pros and cons. We'll tell you the cons because we already know what they are. Tell us why you think this is necessary. Explain to Canadians why it's necessary. And once again, what we see is this, as you mentioned, this ability to create laws that are not created by the usual means, but create these unnecessary and ridiculous financial and regulatory burdens for Canadian business.
Isn't it interesting that no matter what happens when these regulations are brought in by regulatory means, not a vote in Parliament, that none of the bureaucrats actually lose their job, right? Like if a rule or regulation comes in that shuts down a mill or oil and gas or a small business with these regulatory changes to Health Canada, nobody is punished. Like nobody loses their job. So if you put a mill out and there's hundreds of people out of work, which then subsequently shuts down the whole town because of all the spin-off businesses, like nobody gets punished because of it. And it's not a law in Parliament.
No, and of course the other difficulty is just as well as I do that this Liberal government has continued to add civil servants to their ranks. And now I think the civil servants from a federal perspective has increased by 30% in the last 8 years of this Liberal Trudeau government. And we know that the cost associated with that is significant in terms of pay and sadly bonuses, even when a good job is not being done, and
CMHC.
Benefits. CMHC is a classic example. They haven't created one new house for one Canadian, and boy, they still love to get their benefits. How about the CBC? They still got their bonuses and their benefits as the CMHC did. And when we look at those things, that doesn't make any sense. There is absolutely no common sense associated with that. We both know that.
This is something that has been going on a while. So as the Liberals decide, okay, we're back in power, we're going to regulate these health products. We tried back in the early 2000s. The Conservatives came into power. That kind of went away for a bit. Now we're back in charge. It's just a rehash of the old agenda, which basically is, as you said off the top, a bit of control, but also the fact that why would the government let pesky Canadians make decisions? They might hurt themselves, right? This is we know best, and look at everything the Liberals are doing. It all comes back to that, trying to control your life, saying what you can do, what the government approves of, and what they don't. And if you rail against them or come out against them, they'll put you on the naughty list.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a solution looking for a problem, and it's adding smaller print to a bottle which is already impossible to read is not going to solve anything. Maybe it's the government trying to say, well, you must read this, you must do this, you must do that. The Liberal government, as you mentioned, is absolutely insincere and opaque or non-transparent in their approach to why they're doing this. And again, it is taking away the choice of Canadians of how that they want to manage their health care. And we know there's already 6.5 million Canadians without access to primary health care. So it stands to reason that more and more Canadians are choosing to look after their own health in their own way. And as that problem continues, I suspect that there will be more and more Canadians choosing to look after their own health in the way that they wish to do so, which really is the country that everybody should want to live in. Less government interference in your life and more freedom to make the choices which you think are appropriate for you and for your family.
And I think after the pandemic, coming out of that, a lot of people kind of woke up to kind of, how their health and bodies are looked after, and kind of were looking for different options. And like you said, we should have options. Options are good. Competition is good. This type of thing should be regulated so it's safe, but at the same time available to those who choose to try something.
And I think that's the environment that exists at the current time. So as I said, this is a solution looking for a problem. And, I talk to many people here in my local town. And of course, they say, when I go to buy something, I also talk to the person who's selling it, who has knowledge related to that product. Or if I'm buying it at a pharmacy, if it's a vitamin or it's a coenzyme or whatever it is, then I will talk to the pharmacist about it and ask questions to say, hey, does this make any sense? Is this right for me? Does this have any, interference with the medications that I'm taking? Is it okay to take with the other illnesses that I have? Is it going to raise my blood pressure, et cetera? So I don't believe that what they're asking is going to tell you to do that. Again, the common sense to say I'm perhaps on some medications, I'm trying to avoid medications, and how does this fit into my overall plan? Because ultimately, as Canadians, we are responsible for our own health. We should not be abdicating that responsibility. Listen, I know I'm a doctor, but you can't abdicate that responsibility to your doctor either, or to any of your primary care providers. You certainly cannot abdicate that responsibility to your government. Nonsense.
Common sense from the common people. Doc Ellis, the word is always given. The floor is always given to the guest. You can clean it up from here. How would you like to close it out?
Well, you know what? I want to make it clear to folks that we have abdicated on your behalf to ask for an extension of the consultative period. That is something that I specifically asked to the Minister of Health, Jean-Yves Duclos. And the second thing is to say that these regulations, if heaven forbid they're enacted, they need to be also used in the same manner with internationally produced products. So when we look at those things, I think that's important. I'm very, very, very sad to report that he really had no answers for those two questions that I laid at his feet. But as conservatives, of course, and I know my great friend Jamie Schmale is always excited to do this, but we will hold this government to account, and we will ensure that Canada continues to be the freest country in the world.
Love that. Doc Ellis, Member of Parliament for Cumberland Colchester, also the critic for health, the shadow minister, if you will. We appreciate your time. We haven't had you on in a while, and I do apologize. I don't know why, but we'll fix that. We'll have you on again.
There's no shortage of health-related stuff we could talk about, and I absolutely thank you for having me here today, Jamie.
Anytime. Thank you for your time, Doc. And thank you for your time as well. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. This is something I think is affecting many people. I'm sure you heard about it in your conversations with your friends. They need to hear this message to ensure that there is someone actually fighting for them up in Parliament. We're the only party doing that. So you can also tell them to download it, listen to it on platforms like Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, many others as well. You name it, it is out there. New content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Even throughout the summer, we are not taking a week off. And until next week, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.